there was an opportunity to hear Dave share some sacred information, and I'm surprised to hear myself say that because it's not really what I signed up for. But I was so moved by something that he shared with us the other day, um, and I regretted that we didn't record it. There was another phenomenon while Dave was performing this, what he's about to do for us today. And it sounded like it was a chorus that was singing because of the nature of it. So I asked Dave if he would repeat it again. Let's see if the same phenomenon happens. Regardless, the content and the information was just beautiful. So we decided we would record that quickly. So we had that for posterity. And then we'll break for a moment and come back with the regular podcast. So with that, thank you, Dave.
Oh, you're welcome. Hello, everybody. What a pleasure to be here. So we can talk about what it is later. It's just a prayer. Jai Shri Ganesha, Jai Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, 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 Jai Shri Ganesha, Jai Shri Ganesha, Ma Jai Shri Ganesha, Jai Shri Ganesha, Ma Jai Shri Ganesha, Jai Shri Ganesha, Ma Jai Saraswati Ma Saraswati, Jai Saraswati Ma Saraswati, Jai Ma Ji Saraswati Namo 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 Ma Jai Jai Saraswati Namo 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 Ma Jai Jai Saraswati Namo 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 Jai Guru 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 Jai Jai Guru 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 Jai Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Jai Guru 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 Jai Jai Guru Bhakti Guru Shakti Guru Gopal Guru Gopal Guru Gopal Nanagamgam Satchalgam Nanagamgam Satchalgam Narum 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 Om Vasata Gagana Gana Rok Das Vasata Gagana Gana Rok Ulagare the Karoma Kashakama Naskina de Sasana Nalagalaga the Gana Rok Nalagalaga the Gana Rok Yan Praman Pramenta Yan Praman Pramenta Yan Praman Pramenta Ganda Yoga Hatha Yoga Deju Ramuro Dasha Chakra Sadisha Chakra Mani Kun Chakra Ananda Jatra, Vishnu Jatra, Adya Jatra, Sadasa Jatra, Ira Mundala Jasunda, Jaro Bundagiri, 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 Jaro Bundagiri, 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 Jaro Bundagiri, 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 Da, 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 Da. So that's pronounced Vandana. So if you're a Hindu or a person who studies ancient Sanskrit liturgy, a Vandana is a form of great praise. It's also an esteemed title before a first name. If you're a doctor, a professor, or a holy person that does work for people or work for Gaia, then, you know, instead of like Sri Rajneesh, you would be Vandana Rajneesh. And it's a sign of respect, but it's also a ancient Sanskrit word, Vandana, and it's spelled Vandana, Vandana, and it's a sign of respect. But and this also could be a first name for people that it's been attributed to because of their behavior and how sort of wonderful they are. but it's a sign of praise. And at the beginning of the Vandana, it's a little praise to Ganesha, and Ganesha is the patron goddess of new beginnings, but also more importantly, the patron goddess of mothers that have had a newborn baby. So Ganesha is always a very lucky, very good spirit to call into your life if you're interested in Hindu liturgy and Hindu religion. And this, goes back to me talking earlier on earlier programs, responding to members of the tribe. I used to live on an ashram, and that was to study ethnomusicology to finish the course that I started at Occidental College when I was 17 or 16. And I went to Oxy, joined the Ravi Shankar Music Circle, and I played with Ala Raka and the Secretary of State, sitting next to us group. We had two first sectors, the world ram and tabla player. And, I played tabla unprofessionally, but all my life, since I was 15, 12, or 17. And it's an amazing, amazing drum. And what the tabla does is it centers the ethereal and cosmic sound of the sitar, and it brings it back so that you can cycle through different ragas. And remember that everything that we have in the West that's tied into music anyway comes from ancient Sanskrit. All music that we have today are a derivation of both someone's own creativity. There are many instruments that are around since 12th, 13th, 14th century that didn't exist surely in ancient times. But if you look at the way music is structured, you have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And in Sanskrit musical liturgy, you have sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. And sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa is the same as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But that's where the Latin tonal scale is taken from, is from sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. And last conversation I had with Lowell, I got a little ranty, and Lowell and I decided not to print it. We'll put it up, and Robin was there, and added her wisdom to my rant, brought me back down to her. But we did a bandana, and it was nice. But then it sort of went on. And so Lowell and I wanted to share this Sanskrit prayer with you guys because it's an ancient prayer. And when we think about things like the Vedic texts, I think about there's a lot of people that are on media that claim to know that they've read the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, or the Vedic texts, so that they can perhaps learn a little bit about the story of the Purana. There's a lot of things like that. Remember that many of the ancient Sanskrit stories were cleverly composed into ancient hymns. So when you listen to a raga, which could be a sunrise raga or a sunset raga or a raga for world peace, it's a very large composition of different musical instruments. It can be, or it could just be done with a sitar. Normally, there's what's called a tambura in the background, and it has a sort of a beautiful woman's lower half, bottom part, and then it goes straight up, and it's a big hollow carved piece of wood, and it has a rounded fret front with four main strings. The tambura is drummed, and what the tambura does is it immediately sets the pitch for complete relaxation, mentally, complete relaxation, physically, and it helps you breathe. The ethereal sound of the tambura droning, it's a drone, so it plays constantly. It helps set the stage for the introduction of the sitar, which of course has 40 sympathetic strings below the top mainstream strings, I believe 12. And sitar sitar is very different. Like, Ravi Shankar used to have very big, thick calluses on his fingers so that he could jam the way he did. Because it's also played with a finger plectrum, and it's this really nasty steel diamond shape that slips over the first knuckle of your index finger, or it could be the middle finger, but your index finger normally, and then your other fingers are used for strumming the main strings to activate the sympathetic strings. It is very deep, powerful, resonant cosmic sound. Well, they had the foresight because human beings remember important stories better if you turn it into a song. And so they converted all these ancient Sanskrit hymns into amazing classical North Indian Hindustani music. And so there are ragas that will go on for 6 hours, and it'll introduce 4 or 5 different types of drum, perhaps 2 or 3 different types of flute, including transverse flute. There'll be sarods, sarangis, golaks, all kinds of different musical instruments that they'll bring in at different times to accentuate different aspects of the raga. We've all heard Ravi Shankar play, and, you know, dear Ravi's soul, it was heartbreaking when he passed away. They had a beautiful, beautiful service for him in San Diego. And his daughter, Anushka Shankar, she is very popular. She's also a teacher and a maestro and a master of the sitar. How could you not be? She's so, so talented, and she sings. Ravi's first wife, Lakshmi. Now, Lakshmi Shankar had one of the world's most pure voices, tonal, and she could sing with a very minute, like half-second tonal inflections. And she also did polyphonic singing, and she also knew cyclical breathing, to breathe in through your nose and out your mouth at the same time. So you both have lung capacity and fresh air, but you could blow a Merle or a Chennai, play a transverse flute without stopping. So it's really just years and years and years of creating this style of music, thousands. But so
I want to stop you for just a moment, and I don't want you to stop the story, but I heard those 3 people play. The opportunity came along, and at first I kind of skipped over the eastern part of the music. It was the anniversary of George Harrison's passing. There was a concert that had been organized by Eric Clapton.
Huge concert series that went around the world.
Yeah, Ravi wrote a piece of music for the beginning of the concert, and Anushka not only soloed at the beginning of it, then she conducted the rest of them. His wife was there and sang a song that Ravi had conducted for this. It was amazing. Now, when I listen to that concert, I do not skip to the Western music where they're playing George's music. I listen to that part first because it's just fascinating.
Yeah, the music's so lovely. It connects us to something much deeper. And this is part of genetic memory, part of our past lives. And, you know, I did rant a little bit the last time you and Robin and I spoke, and how bloody frustrating it is when people who don't know any better go to sites like the History Channel when Giorgio Tsoukalos is talking about Vimana, and then all of a sudden he starts talking about Sanskrit text, and he does it with this sort of Hollywood familiarity, which means that he probably doesn't read Sanskrit and he probably doesn't speak it, but he knows about it. And this is the difference between having a firsthand experience or firsthand knowledge of something, of actually holding these texts in your hand and reading from them as the pages flip forward by another teacher, because they're very old. And he teaches you, or she teaches you, how to read Sanskrit, and you go through a process of translation for yourself, but you can also, as a student, transliterate them. And I used to do that a lot to learn Sanskrit symbols. And so I would write down in English what the phonetic translation was. So when someone says, when a hymn says, Devi Virstake Bate Mahavashavayam Murtike Haname Babam Yenmayar Shkatam Kratam, you have to be able to translate that into English phonetics. And so it helps when you're learning different aspects of foreign languages. And the resonance, which is the most wonderful thing, is no different when you're listening to sitar and six beautiful, trained classical Hindustani singers singing these ancient hymns. It's no different than being in a temple bell or a crystal bowl environment where you're receiving that deep, deep healing. And even though Kim Jim told me I am in my third incarnation on this world, he said that there are others that have lived for many lifetimes. But there is genetic memory. And because we're a universal family, from this side of the galaxy to the other, encompassing the rest of the universe, we're a universal family. So we all share these distinct commonalities that time delivers to us through existence. So your genetic records are being recorded by energy waves from the very ancient past. And as you're forming as a fetus, your spirit arrives, and those waves of energy from the universe that teach us ancient history, that teach us ancient sounds, pass through our souls. And those little musical notes in the form of frequencies and vibrations script themselves into your chromosomes and your DNA like tiny little light symbols. And they permanently arrange themselves so that you can look at them as a crystal light picture within the very biological existence of your chromosomal chain. So this beautiful starlight is stopped by your DNA. And that's one of the fabulous mysteries of the double helix, is that it has the ability to absorb starlight, absorb healing light, and retain it and distribute it, just like we retain or distribute information through our eyes or through our ears. So Indian music has a very deep, deep sonic vibration, which connects people immediately to some understanding on a deeper level of something that's better. So I sing different hymns from a series of Hindu sacred books called the Shakti Bhat. And the Shakti Bhat carries many, many different forms of hymns and prayers within it. There's thousands. I sing shlokas from the Shakti Bhat because I'm a romantic. I like to sing songs about love and sing songs about humanity receiving the concept of love. And so remember that when you go back further through the very, very oldest of the Vedic texts, you'll find information about Shiva arriving. You'll find information about golden orbs coming down. You will also find information about a war that happened between these giant celestial chariots that fought with nuclear bombs and lightning rays. It's all written down in these ancient, ancient texts. But that's another form of study that doesn't necessarily help me understand the deeper meaning of ancient ragas. Now, as a tabla player, I play, a quintal, which is a very typical rhythmic arrangement of two groups of 8 or 4/4. And a quintal is the spoken language. So, it could be dagadana, 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 dagadana. It's like, 4/4s. And you can play that in the background while the sitar is, perhaps tuning up a little bit, and he's going to come in. But normally at the beginning of an ancient hymn or an ancient piece of music, it starts very slowly, and it goes through 3 phases, and those phases are known as an alap. The second phase is known as a gat, and the third phase is known as a jor. That's J-O-R, jor. So the alap, the gat, and the jor are the 3 components of a raga, and the alap is usually a sort of a melodious, universal sound that brings everybody interested, because perhaps someone's going to sing an ancient hymn about how somebody received higher intelligence. So there's also those songs that exist within ancient shlokas, because most of the liturgy of ancient history is best taught through song or through writing, right? But song. So when the North Indians were doing this for themselves 12, 13, 14, 15, 25,000 years, so were the very earliest tall, redheaded, and blonde, tartan-wearing people of the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union and Siberia. the troubadour tribes lived there in 8000 BC. The way they taught their ancient history of the world, the, the different gods, some were very similar to Nordic, like Krom. So those things were taught to each other, troubadours, the singers, and they would sing their history and play, a violin, or they'd play a hoop drum. And so that went on in the Caucasus Mountains many, many thousands of years, all the way up to the very beginning of the Communist Revolution, where troubadours were seen as gypsies rather than constructed Russians building walls. So, but that sort of was the end of them. But the troubadours were not much different than ancient Cambodian people who built Angkor Wat. You see, because the language of Cambodian, when you look at it, lots of little swirls and circles. Well, it looks very similar to Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit. There's a lot of Sanskrit that looks like ancient Cambodian. And then when you combine Sanskrit and ancient Cambodian, and then you look at photographs of downed interstellar conveyance or parts like the Roswell plate where the hands are, if you look at the writing above those hands, it looks just like a combination of Sanskrit and ancient Cambodian. So our ancient language, ancient family, ancient DNA structures are based on vibration sound. So I was studying this stuff when I was 15. That's why I kept my mouth shut for 4 years after they took me away to another. I didn't want to be somebody going, oh, I want to, get real famous like Giorgio Tsoukalos and throw myself in front of the bus. And so, and by the way, I think I was lucky too, because I had my own business, so nobody could fire me for opening my mouth. I have to make my own money. So I'm pretty lucky the way that worked out too. And we were talking to Paula, what amazing conversation. I watched her, listened to her speak in that convo like 3 times. She said some really interesting things about where you can be in order to access joy. And when I listen to Indian music, I access joy right off the bat. I have a deeper understanding. I'm not, I can sight read a lot of Sanskrit, but not all of it. Sanskrit has many, 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 many symbols. I don't know how many there are. It's many of the Chinese alphabet that I can tell you. And of course, like any language, Sanskrit has changed over the years. So when you go from the very ancient times of 12,000 years ago, then you move forward to the late 14th century.
Right? I think we're just getting used to the way we're meant to communicate. Well, and words, the thing that get us in trouble are, right, yesterday's news. Sound, vibration, man, why is that being put in our field so much recently?
Oh, and then to remember.
Yeah, well, right. You keep referring to, I just keep coming up with symbology. Doesn't matter if it's Sanskrit or if it's something else. When we look at old dialects, I see we're just getting used to looking at the symbols that have been left here a long time. Oh, so you got to ask yourself whether the beyond Earth sentients that have been here and left their marks before, long ago, that these symbols to us are refreshing and new. To them, they've always used them.
Yes, and this tells me that sound is fundamental to vision, sight, and seeing.
Yes, it's I love learning multimedia. It's my nature. I wasn't really a reader very much until I wanted to read about new information. But if you serve that up with a song, I'm good to go. Now, if you add video to it on top of it, oh, now you really got my attention. So I understand the nature of getting a sensation to as many of your senses as is possible, and then it sinks in. But I am more and more appreciating adding sound to symbols.
Bang on, brother. And that's one of the conversations I've had with our friend Asher, because I know whatever Asher is going through right now, we're here to support him. And so he's busy, but he's also busy with an emotional inconvenience because he's a higher soul and he knows that he's alive. So I want everyone to put out some good vibes for Astor. He's not in physical danger. He's just having an emotion. So I want
Well,
everyone,
we all did, and we're going to get back to that here in a moment because
and
really
sound
that
will
was
help
something
that.
we
Sound, I
wanted to
tell you,
touch on.
sound helps that. So that's what
Yeah.
as soon as I was able to have that first 6 months of realization after they got me, I was able to sit at my big desk at home and start making paper models that were square and that had holes punched in the center. Then I was covering those center holes with a piece of clear plastic. And I was taping all these different paper models together into a giant hoop so that they were very articulated. And then I was drawing different symbols. Some would just have straight lines, some would be a circle within another one, some would be a vortex. I was drawing all these different symbols on all these clear holes in a 30-piece articulated paper model. And I'd put it on my desk, make it into a geometric shape, and shine a light through the holes. And so I started to see visions of hieroglyphs spinning, started to see visions of Sanskrit symbols spinning. And then I started to see crop circle images being given to me, flashed from above. I was just laying them on. This isn't my own generated thought of crop circles being turned into a two-dimensional image, put upright and then spinning. And it makes these solid objects that are components. You take a crop circle, believe me, folks, you turn it into a two-dimensional shape. You put it on a stem that spins and spin at a very high rate. Put it on a gimbal and spin that thing at 1,000 RPM or 500 RPM. You're going to
It
see
no
a
longer
solid.
looks 2D.
You'll see a solid object, and each one of them looks like a component to an amazing machine. All of them, and I've done it. I've cut the damn things out and done it and spun them, you know. But all of this has to do with sound, and so from my earliest beginnings, I was attracted to Indian music. Just this real strong pull because I love the way it sounded. It was so pretty. And then the food was amazing. And then I found out that Hindus are extremely peaceful people, like true Buddhists. They don't fight. They don't eat animals. They feed whatever animals nearby that's starving. And I know many Americans take a personal affront to every animal being fed, which is cobras, rats, cows. There'll be stray cows, and the Hindu will make sure the cow has water and fresh grass. And if it's a hot day, the Hindu will make sure the cow has a comfortable place to lay down in the shade. You don't see that from people in the United States. So Hindus have a very ancient respect for all life because they're able to go, what if I was that cow?
Yeah,
What
they
if I,
respect people at a soul level.
and then they respect people on the same level. That's why Hindus tolerate very unusual types of people. That's why they help people that are in the street. I have been to India and I have seen some terrible slums. And it's just so sad. And it's sad for us because we have such abundance. There's a caste system. And yes, indeed, there is a lot of suffering, a lot. And the Indian government and the people are all trying to work on it. There's lots of wonderful charities, and things are getting better for people that have a creek of feces outside their house. But every Indian person, God bless those people, I ever witnessed on the street in Delhi or in Bombay, which is now Mumbai, and getting on a train to go up to the Kashmir province is charity. Everybody has a rupee. So you give them rupee. Here's a rupee. Pretty soon, that person who has really bad tuberculosis or has a crippling hand disease will be able to feed themselves and go buy another warm blanket. So they're just, all of them are such beautiful people. Now, I've seen different versions of Hindus in Europe, yes, and businessmen here in the United States, yes. And so people change a little according to the society they move into. I think that's natural. When I was living in France, I spoke French and German. When I lived in Germany, I spoke German. And so when I lived in Spain, in the wine trade, I spoke Spanish 100% of the time. So we change when we go to different countries because we want to share what their experience is. But what transcends every experience? Sound. Sound and music bring people together in joy, harmony. So I was really, lucky to have this thing that I wanted to go to, you know. And then, yeah, and when Grandpa found out, and he was in the CIA, and Grandpa found out that I wanted to study Indian music, well, he flipped out and said, what it's like in that country. And so when I really showed him that I was a top student, then he said, right, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go live on an ashram in India. And he flipped out and yelled at me for like 2 hours, and then he paid for it. So everybody got what they want from grandfather, but you had to listen to him yell at you for 2 hours. And it was pretty scary. But so I moved there, and then I came back and I studied more. I moved up to Northern California, got to where I. So now, after having my experience, I watch these media channels, and I think it's all coming from a good place. I think Giorgio Tsoukalos has actually done a lot of good just by showing people UFOs or interstellar conveyance on television. That makes people think some way. So who cares? But what I like is being able to put up or shut up. And then this is kind of what I ranted about the last time I spoke, was that, don't send me the name of a healing science. If you're going to teach me Buddhism, teach me Buddhism. And just so you guys know, in Buddhism, real Buddhists don't pray to Buddha. They thank Buddha. And when you see someone bowing to Buddha like that, and this is something that gets on my tip. He's not a god. He was a teacher. So it's like, as someone who loves physics, James Clerk Maxwell, I send him praise, his spirit praise, because he helped us with the right hand rule and taking the amperes and Gauss relativity theory about magnetism. And he finally added the mu naught epsilon naught to show the empirical value and write the true equation for electromagnetism. God bless him. So, he was the person that had the divine spark in the Victorian period. And so he had that epiphany. Well, so I send him good vibes too, just like I do to Buddha. So Buddha didn't want praise. He was just a teacher with good advice. And so we always have to acknowledge good advice. So I studied Buddhism. I studied Hinduism. And I wanted to, as a guy from California who used to be a surfer stoner, I wanted to be able to open my mind and accept the reality of other human beings. And at a young age, I understood that people were very important. But it took me all of my life, plus the meeting with Kim Jim, to access the region of my mind that allowed human beings to just be without judgment. And there's a big difference between allowing human beings to be and talking about their sovereignty when those human beings have done something wrong. And so I don't judge because Jesus didn't judge. I don't judge because Kim Jim doesn't want me to judge people. Neither did Buddha or Confucius. But
I
do
don't think when you say you don't because of them, I'll just finish this really quick. That's who you are. It just happens to coincide with their thought patterns, but that's who you are, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind, and I guess that makes sense. It also was a hard lesson to be able to take compliments and to receive gifts, because of the way my grandfather raised me, my mom raised me. It was really like, don't accept anything from anybody. And it's,
Yeah, givers, there's your lesson. That was the hardest one for me because I was just used to being the one who gave. I had to understand the nature of balance in the universe. And when I was cutting off people wanting to give me whatever it was, thanks, gifts, whatever, I was blocking that. I was choking off the flow of the universe by being unwilling to receive. And until I let that go, wow, things just opened up in a way that I didn't understand when I finally allowed somebody to give me something with gratitude. Oh, it was that. But man, that's an adjustment that I had to make, and it wasn't my nature.
Well, that's really interesting because, and one of the things that we have to sort of break through or fight through as Americans, with all the abundance we have, is to think that a gift or giving is going out spending money on something. I think And this is another great lesson that I was able to learn from ancient Sanskrit, ancient Buddhist or Hindu texts, and having kind older teachers. Remember when I was 15, I always wanted a grandfather like Ravi Shankar, and Ravi was very, very kind, very sweet, dear person. And when I first met him, I gave him 3 raw amethyst crystals. I think I was 15 and a half. And he took them and he just looked at them. They were really pretty purple crystals that had been pocket pieces since I was 13. So they were well worn and beautiful, big diamond shapes. And he took them in his hand. And he said, I can't accept this. This is so beautiful. And I said, your music made me feel so good. Won't you please keep them? And he blessed me. And then since then, I was invited into the Ravi Shankar Music Circle when he found out that I could cobbler or was interested. But it was also that night that I met his best friend, Alla Rocca. And Alla was a very generous, round, bald guy, older, very sweet, kind face, and he had a beautiful voice. And his son is Hector Hussein. Well, Allah's passed away too, and that broke my heart because he was one of my teachers for about 5 months when he visited LA. And every time he showed up, I would go and see him and sit with him. And his son, Zachary, was just fabulous. I mean, when we were 15, he could play tabla like nobody's business. And I was, working on the fundamentals. Most of the children in India that are given this treasure of playing music within a musical family are started out at the age of 2 or 3 because they're born with the sound. All the instruments are around them. And right away, they're babies and the young people are taught to be gentle with items, to walk gently within the house, to be conscientious and careful. So they, because you knock over a sitar, man, those things are so expensive. They're all handmade and hand carved. And oh my God, a decent sitar will cost you $6,000 just off the start. And that's a good student's one. And so your children learn a lot too about respect and being conscientious because the music produces this amazing sort of response in all humans that hear it. I mean, I had a hard time too, believe me. I went off on my own up into the Hindu Kush. I was on a horse that I bought, and I was almost 17. No, I was almost 18. And bloody hell, I ran into these guys that I guess were Northern Raiders, and just think of the Mongol warriors from the times of Attila the Hun. And they came up to me and right away they banged me on the nose with the back of the rifle and knocked me out. But then they saw my tabla strapped to the horse and they woke me up. And they felt really bad about it. And out came the hash pipe, out came some eucalyptus oil and a cotton swab and put that in my nose because they split my nose. And we had a fire and they shared their food with me. And we couldn't speak to each other and understand each other. I knew a little bit about it. But they handed me my tabla back and they asked me to play. And sure enough, out came a tar, which is a beautiful single-stringed instrument that you bow with your fingernail. And it's one stick with one key turn and one wire and has a round wooden bowl with a skin stretched over it. And it has the most beautiful sound. And then out came like an ocarina, like a small, low-sounding flute. And these guys jammed. And so I'm sitting out in the face of the Hindu Kush with 3 guys that would have killed me if they thought I was a dumb American with money. And they didn't do it. And not only did they wake me back up and have a jam session with me, they let me stay with them for 3 days as we rode up into the Hindu Kush. They showed me where they went to go get aquamarine, which is my birthstone. And they knocked off this beautiful piece of matrix with about 150 aquamarine crystals growing in it, and they handed it to me. And then they told me head back down to the valley. And it was in the wash, so I couldn't get lost. And oh my God, Lola, it was the most amazing adventure. And so I still have that chunk of aquamarine in my closet.
You showed it to me.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like, and Indian music did all of this for me when I was a boy. And so there was like, with everything that I've done and all the fun I've had in life, there's no need to make up a story about Kim Jim showing up. He's sort of like finishing the process, of like understanding. So then I started making these light models right away. And then much later, when we started talking about quantum hypertext publicly and shining light through the mathematic formula lenses to achieve a geometric value by looking at the different shape that the shadow produces, which then gives us the three-dimensional symbological reference to turn into another part of the great machine. Remember the Antikythera, the square box with the wheels in it that turned out to be a very complicated planetary clock and astrolabe device? The one they found in
Yes.
Antikythera, Greece in the Mediterranean? Right. Well, I see crop circles and quantum hypertext and all these different languages spinning in three-dimensional shapes and being put together in front of me like a massive Antikythera of cosmic proportions. And I'm building my way up to finding this mappable discovery that we could have blueprint diagrams of. So every component of mathematics and every component of higher dimensional thinking is being handed to me in a short period of time. And it's very difficult to deal with reality, bills and roommates and running a shop. Thank God for my son. He runs the shop so I can go sit on my ass and take a deep breath. So there's a huge volume of things that I'm trying to coordinate that are all cosmic messages and higher thinking messages about physicality and non-physicality. And then there exists this giant cosmic Antikythera made from all these ancient languages, made from the shape of these different equations. Oddly enough, with my three-dimensional quantum images, there's Sanskrit symbols and ancient Cambodian writing symbols that when you spin them, they look oddly similar to the mathematics symbols. So there's repetitions of information that we're all supposed to be paying attention to coming to us on all kinds of higher levels. Then I get a little frustrated with people because they keep wanting to talk about their emotions. And your emotions are different. Your emotions are a chemical response to the stimulus that you receive from that sort of around you. They really are. You can have emotions from thoughts, but then again, why are you suffering from thoughts? Because those should have been left in the past. So I have a frustration issue where if you really want to understand what the work is that I'm doing, or if you want to understand quantum mechanics on a higher level, according to their plan, not mine. Remember, they showed me quantum hypertext. They said that, humans are writing with a two-dimensional or three-dimensional object, two-dimensional language on a one-dimensional sheet. So what does that tell you, David? Now pick those images up, turn them into a three-dimensional image and spin them in front of you so that you see their physicality and the higher purpose of the geometry of the symbol itself. As we taught you thousands of years ago how to record the symbols, but you've forgotten why, right? You've got the language, you've got the sounds, you've got the music, you have the Akashic records, you have the Sanskrit hymns, you have everything, but you've forgotten how to use them. So then I get images of the shofar being blown outside the walls of Jericho and how for, 7 turns around the walls of Jericho blowing on the sound, the walls crumbled, turned into dust. And the walls of Jericho were, legendary. They were 180 feet tall. They were 60 feet thick, made from stone that no army could ever penetrate. But when they blew those ram's horns, the vibration caused all the rock to crush into powder and drop. That's a true story. So we have all this information about sound. And now, once again, mainstream technology is using sound for levitation. And you can go on these little YouTube snippets to Mr. Whatever Brainiac Science Channel and watch somebody levitate this little piece of crap between a bunch of speakers. Well, that's just the very beginning. But did you know that your body can produce those sounds? Na deru basmrukro brahma na deru Danner ha no. Ah. So you get all these different ranges. So when you get 50 other human voices nailing it at the same timbre, in the same sonic vibration that I'm nailing it at, that you create a massive sound wave that makes things change around you. So sound is crucial to understanding visually. And also we get those, light vibrations that come back. We don't really see things, but we don't see light. We see what light does when it reflects off an object, right? Light is all around us, but we don't see it until we're looking at something. And then what you're seeing is the reflection that light produces. So we're never really seeing that which is around us, but it's like sound. It's an ethereal existence. It's a plane of existence. Light, sound, gravity, planes of existence. So yeah, we understand that spending your life in service to others will create your ability to awaken to your higher functions. And your higher functions will then become more clear. It's repetition. It's just like playing the piano or learning French. You have to do it over and over and over again. And you, Paula, and I were talking about repetition when we were reading, trying to remember quotes.
Well, Paula's here. We should see if she wants to chime in because I'm sure she's got some thoughts.
I really am enjoying the conversation, to be honest with you. And I'm making a little veg soup. It's chilly in Texas, so it's a veg soup day. Yeah, but I'm loving the conversation for sure. I love the sound and the frequency. Telling you, I believe in my heart of heart, if you can shift the things that you receive from a frequency perspective, like music or even language, and general information that you allow into your experience, I believe it will very much express itself outwardly quickly. Yeah.
Well, all of this started because the other day when we were recording for what we thought was going to be Dave's podcast, and we did this in the green room first, and so he shared this poem, if you want to call it that. And the Capricorn part of me was fascinated because when Dave began to sing, there was something caused it sounded like a chorus. It sounded like there was another person singing an octave above him, same words, same cadence, everything else. And I was just so fascinated with it that I missed out on the freaking performance because in my little mind, I need to tear this apart and go, why is it I'm hearing another voice over his? And at the end, I went on and on about that and regretted that we had not recorded it because it was so compelling to me. And it happened for the whole duration. I'm trying to think, is it, the location in the store that's causing it, or is it just something going through Dave? I believe that, Dave was just, he understands by whatever training he's had to learn these songs, hymns, whatever you want to call them, there's a quality that he can add that resonance that makes it sound like there's more than one person freaking singing. That was why I really wanted to do this again to see if we could capture it again.
I think some of it has to do with the resonance in the room and stuff. And, we're in production. I'm going to have to sign off in a couple minutes because I got to open my front door. Yeah, I'm not a polyphonic singer, so I don't reach polyphonic levels. It's very difficult to sing polyphonic. But there's a resonance wave that's generated. It could be an echo, or it could be ancient spirits that are also chiming in. I think that can't be.
Well, I ruled out echo because echo would sound just like you, repeated. This was something that was an octave above where you were, and it was noticeable. I tried to separate it out. And
timing, starlight, false starlight, So I'm glad Paula got some of that. Yeah, it was important though. I wanted to come on and give you guys the gift of Vedana. Vedana is looks like it's spelled bandana, and it's not Von Donna, it's Wendana. And they're praise, songs of religious praise or heartfelt praise that you give to a goddess or God or Mother Earth or someone who you admire greatly. And so those are all just parts of the different teaching processes. So, you know, if you're going to study something, folks, study as much of it as you can. It's really important to stay in your own lane. So, you know, I also want to get on before I leave today and say, hey, like, you know, it's one thing me saying, you know, it's another to sit here and be able to, you know, sing in Sanskrit and share with some of the expansive experience I've had. That I think everyone should tune into some Ravi Shankar, take a deep breath, and listen to the whole album. I got to go because we're opening the door. Namaste to Lowell and Paula. You guys have a great day. Bye. If anyone checks in on that would be cool. I got to go.
See you later.
Namaste. Thank you for all the information.
Hey, it's all fun. Have fun, guys.
Well, there was a reason why we covered this information. It wasn't what we had intended. It wasn't what I had intended. So we'll be recording something again here soon. What happened last week was I had some interactions with some orbs, and I have been sorting that out. And the day before Valentine's Day, without going into detail, because I will, it's too far into the hour to begin. But there was a moment I had where I was just wondering, what am I doing here? How did I get here? Why am I not, you know, kind of enjoying my retirement? Why am I not traveling like that? Why? And it took me, man, it was the whole day. I had to carry that through, and something would happen the next day. But this, like I said, it's going to require a little more than the time we should allow now. So stay tuned. I'm going to cover it because it wasn't just me. I had heard from Dave, who had called me the next morning and had a similar kind of reflex, like, just, I'm done with this. I'm ready to walk away from it. I'm thinking about not doing this anymore. And something shifted the next day. But I'll go into that again later so that you can appreciate
now I'm very curious.
There were physical changes that took place in my dimensional awareness that were, I said, unnerving politely. Honestly, yesterday was the day I was talking about it with Dave after it had happened several days ago, that it was the first time I can honestly say that I thought I had dealt with my fears and put that behind me. And I was afraid that day. It wasn't that I hadn't seen and experienced extraordinary things before, and I'm okay with that. But when it strikes your physicality and it sets off circumstances that you can't turn off, it was unsettling the first time that this extended, you know, I talk about being able to see things, you know, in higher dimensions. And right now, man, the veil is super thin. And when you're in energetic areas and conditions are right, you know, this stuff just reveals itself. Well, I couldn't turn that off the other day. I was seeing things like through an ether and couldn't stop seeing it until I closed my eyes long enough that appeared to be like a reset. But I had to go into a meditative state to got that. Man, it shook me like I hadn't been shook before. I thought, you know, I was pretty grounded. That threw me for a loop. And it was, you know, the next day after that I went, you know, what the hell am I doing here? What what made me feel like that? And what am I doing here? So I know I started it's going to cause you all to listen to this to listen to the next one for sure, because I'll expand on that. There were some other messages that came my way. There was other contact that took place. I swear there was a ship over the house because I heard that kind of engine type sound that I'd heard before. So I will elaborate on it more. That all happened the same day that I had posted some activity I found in the sky when I was just, knew I was going to record some orbs out in the backyard the night of Valentine's Day. And that was kind of the end of this kind of recovery period I needed. But enough about that for now. I promise I will do more. But Paula, I'm sure you have an observation. So before I cut off, why don't you give it to me?
Well, I hate to pull you back into it, but do you think it was like some kind of little premonition that you're feeling in your physical form for future endeavors, or you feel like it was something in the here and now?
There is
Not that there
an
is any time or
energetic
space,
shift.
but
Uh, there's an energetic shift that just leveled me up differently. Now I'm kind of trying to connect the dots. All of this happened after activations that happened Wisdom Spirit Ranch. They happened there. This area is energetic enough, and so there were downloads I got that I had to sit with to unpack. And now that I understand what they are, it is what cracked open the whole discussions and advisories about the golden tie all over again. So that's what kind of triggered it. And the Solarians were those orbs that showed up. So I will go into more detail about that
next week then.
Yes, because I had a higher aspect that came and explained, what it all was. Okay.
I'm excited. Yeah, those are just I am a listener this week. I feel, very grounded in what I'm doing right now. And it's
I had kind of regretted, because it was my intention to kind of open the door, because Dave and I were both feeling the same way last week. He had reached out to me like a day before, and he goes, I might be done with all this. And then that same kind of thing just kind of passed through my field. It was like, here was a moment where just stop the presses. Let's just stop for a moment to see what's around us here and analyze, what are we doing here? How did we get here? And where are we going? It was one of those moments, but I hadn't had one of those. I'd always been curious about the next thing that the universe was going to show me. That day was not it. But we'll get
all
into
the powers
more.
in the present moment. The power.
Well, things shifted after that to show me an answer in forms that I wasn't used to. I've certainly had many multidimensional experiences now that I'm used to. What I wasn't used to is it changing the physicality of my vision. That was a little freaked out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. When the first time it happened, it's almost like I'm seeing double vision, but it's in my periphery. So it's almost like you're looking through ethers out there, but all of a sudden your horizon has expanded, and the spectrums that you see in it are elevated. So when you close your eyes in a place where I've seen that type of thing on the mountain, when I'm alone in the forest, I haven't seen it in the neighborhood here. So the conditions that are here, there's animals in the lot next door. There's the occasional car that goes by. Historically, this is not the kind of environment where the vibration is high enough to have those experiences. So once I kind of put all that into check, then I couldn't stop it. So closed my eyes and sat there for a good 5 minutes. And when I opened my eyes, okay, we're back to what would be normal for me. Then it happened a second time, and that's when it got a little unnerving.
It's exciting.
Yes and no. Curse and blessing. Yes. So we'll elaborate on it more now that I've got you all teased to listen to the next one. I promise I'll go into it more because there's information that was for everybody, not just for me, everybody. Okay.
All right. Sounds great.
All right.
Great week.